My name is Amy Mielek, and I am a psychologist at Seattle Children's Hospital who works on the cochlear implant team under the Childhood Communication Center. And I'm going to be moderating the panel today. We have 4 people who have volunteered to spend part of their morning with us to share their experiences. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves. We're going to start with Angela.
Hi, good morning. My name is Angela Fritz. My pronouns are she, her. I am an infant physical therapist at Seattle Children's Hospital, and I also do some community-based outpatient follow-up at Odessa Brown Children's Clinic. I have moderate to severe hearing loss that was diagnosed when I was about 5 years old, and I use hearing aids, closed captioning, and a transcriptionist services for accessibility.
I'm Bridget Roman. I'm an audiologist at Seattle Children's. I've had hearing loss since birth. I was diagnosed at 9 months and got hearing aids around the same age, and then I got a cochlear implant 16 years. I was 1 implant, and I got my 2nd implant about 5 years ago.
Okay. And Cole?
Good morning. My name is Paul Hartman. My pronouns are he, him. Work at Seattle Children's. I work in the foundation. I do fundraising with donors that support Seattle Children, including the Child Center. Also co-chair the Disability Inclusion Network with Angela of Seattle Children. The level of my hearing loss is significantly deaf and high-pitched frequencies, and my hearing loss is I have relatively normal hearing for low-pitched frequencies. I wear Oticon hearing aids, and we lift, and we closed captioning for accessibility.
Okay. Cole, your audio was a little hard for me to hear. I don't know if you can move it closer. So we'll go ahead and have Sophie introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Sophie Racine. I'm an audiologist at Seattle Children's Hospital. I have a severe to profound hearing loss in both ears. I was diagnosed at 3 years old, and I wear hearing aids.
Okay, thank you very much for introducing yourself. I forgot to say my pronouns are she, her. Usually it's by my name. So we'll see if anyone has any questions. We're going to start with some that we already have. So the first question was, describe some difficult listening situations and coping strategies that you have found useful in your life. So what were some difficult listening situations, and how did you cope with them? So anyone want to start with that question? Anyone want to be brave? Okay, Bridget?
I found background noise to be particularly difficult. And so when I'm in the presence of background noise, I really try to find ways to get that audio signal, whether it's being closer to the speaker or using some type of remote microphone system. I used that a lot when I was in school, making people aware that I have hearing loss and may need clarification or trying to get access to written materials like handouts or having people email me or send me a chat instead of talking to me. On online meetings, I actually log in twice where I try to listen on my phone so I can hear the Bluetooth. And I like the captioning better on my phone, and I like having a bigger picture on the computer screen. So I will log on to a meeting, like I'm logged on twice. That's why I'm having trouble with the microphone, because I'm logged on my phone and the computer. So I'm trying to figure out a way that I can get the best audio signal, because the better the signal to noise ratio, the easier it is for me.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else have a situation and examples? Yeah, Angela?
Two came to mind. One, when I was growing up, I played basketball, and so I was often in a really loud, noisy, busy gym that was very overwhelming from a listening fatigue perspective. I read lips really well, and so at the time, I would usually take my hearing aids out, and I would just rely on reading lips, and that worked out most of the time. There were a couple of times where I would miss something my coach was saying to me, but for the most part, that was really helpful for me to just reduce the level of overwhelm and distractions. And then another common situation that I encounter now in the workplace is like a really busy lunchroom. And oftentimes, lunch is when I try to take a listening break, and it's really hard to do that, even if I take my hearing aids out and find a corner when there's so much noise and distraction around. So I've tried to be really intentional about finding a quiet, secluded place for me to really just take my hearing aids out and unwind.
Okay. So I like your word intentional. We have to be intentional about these things. Anyone else have any example of an environment that was hard or something that you did? So listening breaks, trying to use the technology that's available. Anything else? Taking your devices out and just depending on lip reading, which can be challenging, specifically in sports situations. Anyone else want to add to that, or do we want to move on to the next question? Okay, I'm going to move on to the next one then. How do you advocate for yourself in different environments, such as when you were at home or school or at work or socially? How do you advocate or let people know in your environment what you need, either as a child or now as adults in the work environment and in social environments? How have you been able to advocate for yourself? Sophie?
I think advocacy is something that you learn over time. I think as a child, I didn't really understand fully how to advocate for myself. I relied a little bit on my parents and my sister for that. However, as I got older, I started to learn, okay, I need to tell people I can't hear them. And I used to get by a lot, and I used to sort of just kind of cruise through without telling anyone, and that didn't help me. And so it doesn't help ever. So I think one of the things I learned is learning how to talk about what my hearing loss is. Having that vocabulary and language can help you with advocacy. Without that language and without that vocabulary, it's really difficult to really advocate for yourself. And so that's something that I learned over time is, okay, what do I have? What do I need? And if I can just get that verbally and practice that in front of a mirror or with my parents or with my family or just close friends, then I can start, reaching out to a broader, more strangers or people that I meet on the street or people that I meet in restaurants or things like that.
I loved how you said that for a long time you what I call to tell the kids is bluff. You tried to bluff or do the and pretend you understood, and then you realized that didn't really help you and probably got you maybe into some sticky situations, and learning that it was better to be an advocate instead of bluffing. Cole, you have your hand up?
I try to talk louder so you can hear me, I hope.
Okay, that's better. That's better.
For me, Sophie, I like what you said about advocacy. I think when we're teenagers and kids, we're so self-aware, and whether it's being bullied or sensitive about being picked on or an outcast. For example, I went to dinner last night and it was a 10-seated restaurant. So I thought it was going to be really easy to hear. And nope, it was so hard to hear, and I was so annoyed. And that flexibility is so important. I was intentional about sitting across from the two people I was with. They didn't realize why I sat there. And I made sure to ask them to look at me when they spoke, because often they were looking at each other. And it becomes a norm to self-advocate once you've done it for a long time. And unfortunately, it's so hard to move forward and advance in life without advocating. And being able to sit across from someone to read the lips, it's really important to be nimble and flexible, yet it's exhausting at the same time.
Yes. You have to think about things on multi-levels that other people don't take into consideration, and that can be really exhausting. Angela?
I really appreciate what Cole and Sophie said. I just wanted to add one thing, that I have a pin on my badge that says I read lips. And it used to be really helpful. Now in the pandemic and everyone wears masks, it doesn't really matter. And that has its own challenges. But this is a way that I sort of, like, Cole talked about how it can be exhausting to advocate, and I completely relate to that. And this is a way that I sort of passively advocate, that helps me a bit at work.
Yeah, that's great, but masks have made it even more challenging. Bridget?
I feel like one of the side benefits of the pandemic has been a lot of people with normal hearing have realized how difficult listening situation can be, and so I've had a lot of people be more sympathetic to what it's like for people with hearing loss. And I like the older that this is something I've struggled with all my life. I've always felt bad having to advocate for myself, having to ask for people to help or people to be understanding of my communication needs. And the older I get, the more I realize most people are genuinely kind and want to help, and all I need to do is say something. But that's something that I still struggle with even now as an adult. Another thing I wanted to say about advocacy, I feel like this is something that people don't always think about, is being good to yourself. Feeling like if a situation is too difficult for me, do I want to be in that situation? Do I need to be in that situation? Because, I feel like people are hearing lots so often. You often feel like, oh, I have to try to be a part of the community or a part of a social group or a part of what other people are doing. And sometimes it's okay to say, you know what, this is not really the best thing for me right now. And it's okay to take a step back and say, I'm going to do something that's better than me, even if other people can't quite understand that.
Yeah. And that can be really hard. I think that takes a lot of growth and a lot of knowing yourself, which as an adult, you probably are better at that. But for kids, that's a really hard thing to learn, that it's okay. And as Angela's shirt said, be kind. I love your shirt. And I think hopefully people are kind, and that you don't know if someone's going to be kind unless you ask, unless you put yourself out there. All right, do we have another question, or did anyone want to add anything else about advocacy? I guess I had one question. Who do you think really helped you learn your advocacy skills? Was it professionals, or was it your parents, or was there one person that kind of helped you, or was it meeting someone else with hearing loss that you observed what they did? How did you learn advocacy? Because I do groups with the kids and I want to know how's the best way to help them. Sophie?
So for me, growing up, my dad's a pediatrician, and he would go to school every year and tell my teach them about the hearing loss and everything, and about the FM system, and he really went out of his way to have that connection with all my teachers every year, and so I think through him, I really learned a lot about how to advocate for myself. As an adult though, I would say that it was my own audiologist who was just like, you need to stand up for yourself. And I think you need to you need to know what it is that you need, and you need to express that need. Because I think a lot of times I still am growing. My needs are constantly changing, and I'm still figuring out what's better and what doesn't work. Because I'm in different environments and I'm learning more about myself. And so I'm also learning that there's certain days of the week where I'm just way more tired than other days. And so my needs are changing based on that too. So I think really the two people really are my dad and my audiologist.
So, Cole, I'm going to get to you for a second, but Sophie, was the audiologist the one you saw at like a hospital or a school audiologist? 'Cause
So I went to sort of like a private
okay,
audiologist, and it was more when I was in grad school, really.
okay,
I had this amazing audiologist growing up, sort of as a teenager, and then she ended up moving, so I lost her, and it was like the most devastating day of my life. But this is someone that was more of a mentor who has really given me a lot of tough love speeches about advocating for myself. So yeah.
okay. Cole,
Similar to Sophie, my mom was a really empowering voice that I really set a role model for me to see, to break barriers down and to speak up. In addition to hearing loss, I'm legally blind, so I have had to really step up to ensure that not only I can see, but hear. And working with my special ed teacher in elementary school really sticks out to me. Uh, and as I got older, my mom would empower me to work on my own IEP plan and really work with the teachers on my own at a young age to set a plan, to set success, and to speak up. So that was really important that I was given autonomy at a young age to learn the ropes of working with teachers to set me up for success.
Angela.
Well, I have kind of a bit of a different story, I think. When I was younger, my hearing loss was more mild to moderate. And so, talking about bluffing, that's sort of my childhood experience. After first grade, was bullied really, really hard about my hearing aids, and the social cost was too high. So I made a deal with my parents that if I could get away with reading lips, then I would sit in the front of the classroom, and as long as my grades didn't slip, I didn't have to wear my hearing aids at school. And I thought that was a big win, and I did that all throughout school. And um, what I'm realizing now is that I sacrificed so much by doing that socially, academically. I did get good grades, but at what cost? It instilled this feeling of perfectionism in me that I had to overcome my hearing loss rather than embrace it as a part of my identity. And I really struggled a lot with internalized ableism as it relates to my hearing loss. And I will say that Cole actually has been a really important person in my life as teaching me how to advocate. Um, prior to meeting him through our disability inclusion network at the hospital, I didn't really have a lot of peers with similar experiences. And so he's really kind of like inspired me to stand up for myself and to validate my feelings, and has been a great peer support in that way.
Thank you, Angela. I was wondering, since we're talking about listening fatigue, you may not have realized when you were a little kid and weren't wearing your devices and you were putting, I don't know if you saw this, but that internal motivation increases listening effort. And I'm wondering, can you think how did that listening effort impact you as this little kid in elementary school? Did you come home exhausted at the end of the day? Did you get headaches? Did you recognize the listening fatigue that you were and the listening effort you were putting forward?
Yeah, absolutely. My family always teased me that I'm like such a good sleeper. Like I, went to a sleep specialist for concerns about narcolepsy because I literally can fall asleep on a dime. Um, I also have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a connective tissue disorder that results in a lot of hypermobility and increased muscle fatigue as well. And so, what I've learned over the time is that, yes, I probably am a good sleeper, but really that fatigue from listening and in combination with my hypermobility had really had a big impact on me. So I would fall asleep at school a lot. I would asked to go to the nurse's office because I had a headache and I would just sleep on the table. I did have a headache, but I really needed a nap. I remember like being frustrated at social events after school and kind of a little more crabby than is my usual self because I was so tired. Um, and certainly missed out on a lot of social events. I remember being at sleepovers and, the lights would go off. So there goes my secret weapon of lip reading and everybody's whispering. So now, even if I could lip read and even if I did have my hearing aids, I'm out. And I would just sort of try and like laugh when it seemed appropriate, but I really missed out on so many of those important social aspects as a kid. So I do definitely recognize that. And as I've learned more about the importance of early amplification, if that's the choice that you choose, that being consistent with that is important. And whenever I meet with babies I work with who have early hearing loss, I always tell their parents that, like, don't do what I did. Listen to your audiology team and amplify if that's what your plan is.
Bridget?
Well, I wanted to say that I think it's great that Angela and Carl have had that relationship. For me, growing up, and I'm assuming a lot of parents are listening today, but I'm hearing a common theme of parents teaching their child how to advocate for themselves. And I think that parents have a very important role in teaching their child that they are important, that they are worthy of advocating for themselves. My parents often would meet with teachers ahead of the school year. They would talk about what equipment that I need to use in the classroom. My parents really push hard because they know that I was too young to do that for myself. So they had to do it for me. They had to advocate for me in the school system. But one thing I do wish my parents had done was teach me not to be ashamed of my hearing loss. They always described it as a problem that needed to be fixed. I was not allowed to call myself deaf. I was only allowed to call myself hearing impaired. And I feel like I've had more self-acceptance after I started working in the field of audiology. And we didn't really talk about listening fatigue when I was a kid. My parents kind of expected me to do everything that normal hearing kids did. And so I think I've always learned to be a hard worker. I have to pursue everything. I just have to do everything the same way that normal hearing people do. And so that's something I think that parents can really focus on with their kids is learning more self-acceptance, being proud of who you are, being not being afraid to ask for help. But I just wanted to emphasize that I think parents have a very big role in how their children grow up.
And also, I think hopefully after this talk, parents and educators and audiologists, everyone on the call, will understand how much listening effect is impacting everyone. And probably, when you guys were growing up, and even the young adults that are going to be joining us, it really wasn't discussed how much listening effect was impacting you. And, but you were giving this message, like Bridget said, that you had to keep up. You had to, but no one was acknowledging how hard you were working and how much extra effort you were putting in every single situation. Cole?
To your point, I will say one of the proudest things of having disabilities and being hearing impaired and visually impaired is it has disciplined me to be a really hard worker. Whether that's workforce, social, and you have to put in extra effort. So I just wanted to your point, the discipline component of that.
So when you're at work and you now are maybe more aware of your listening fatigue, what do you do in a work environment to kind of maybe reduce or in a social environment to reduce that listening fatigue? Are you aware of strategies, or do you just do it and don't realize you're doing it? Kind of hard to know because you just do it without really thinking, probably. Angela?
I definitely have strategies now, and I actually have a job accommodation that I submitted through HR in order to protect some of these things. So my office at the hospital is just cubicles open, very, very loud, very noisy, really difficult to hear what is and isn't being said to me, what I need to pay attention to. And I was finding that even just in the morning trying to do my chart review and documentation, I was experiencing a lot of overwhelm and listening fatigue. And so I went through the process to have a job accommodation that allowed me to do some chart review and documentation from home where I can be in my quiet environment, not have to screen out if people are talking to me or not, to really be able to focus. And that's been a really helpful strategy.
That's a great strategy. I think Bridget had hers next.
Similar to Angela, I feel like working from home helps because if I'm in a distracting environment with visual distractions or auditory distractions, I have a much harder time trying to focus on what I'm trying to listen to. And so sometimes I will, if I'm having a conversation with someone, I prefer to move to a quieter room. If I am trying to listen to parents, I will try to make sure that they reduce background noise. So if I'm with a parent where a child is crying, I will actually send that child into another room so I can listen to the parent alone. So the main thing for me is trying to reduce any auditory or visual distraction. And I do have job accommodations as well, where I don't have to work with families who use interpreters because I had trouble with interpreters who have Macs and I had a hard time understanding their accents. So that is a job accommodation that I have.
Okay, that's interesting. Angela? I'm sorry, Sophie?
No worries. Hi. So I think being an audiologist with a hearing loss is a blessing and a curse in itself. You are in a soundproof room, which is just phenomenal. There's very minimal background noise, except for if a child is crying, it's a little challenging. But I think for me, I definitely am trying to utilize that, microphone once in a while when I need it, for when I'm doing specific testing with children. And I think that definitely working from home is very helpful, in terms of just trying to hear patients on the phones and whatnot, because sometimes the phone is really challenging. But again, I think this is where I'm still learning about what it is that I need, because each office environment is different. And it's just a matter of just finding what works best for you. And I think it just, I don't know. I do realize that a lot of times at the end of the day, or even in the middle of the day, I am checking out. And I don't always realize it's because of listening fatigue, but it's a moment where everything is just, it's become sort of like background noise and I'm just not paying attention. And it kind of it creeps up on you and you don't realize it happening until you're just sort of like, wait a minute, I'm totally checked out for a moment. So there are just moments that it just really messes with you a little bit. But I think in terms of the office environment, soundproof booth is really nice in terms of talking to patients.
So you found that using the soundproof booth for more than, let's switch the interpreter, more than just doing the testing is really helpful.
Yeah.
And if you could just do your report writing and all your charting in there, it would be good, but you can't be in the booth the entire day.
No, I know. It's really unfortunate, but it when it's available, we try to take advantage of it.
Okay. Cole?
I wish I had that as an office. That sounds great. I will often work in an office setting with hotel shared spaces, and we have a lot of individual focus rooms that are meant for a short amount of time. But I use that as an accommodation because I need an isolated environment. Often, a lot of my work is on phone calls. I can be loud. I need to be able to hear people. A couple blessings of COVID and work environment. Before COVID, so a lot of my work is phone calls with no read and list, and that's a nightmare for someone with hearing loss. And I learned to deal with it. But before COVID, I used to always use a regular landline. But once COVID hit and got new hearing aids, I used Bluetooth through my phone, for all my work calls because it's set up with my hearing aid settings. And I can't tell you what a blessing that's been and able to really function and do my job well. And also, all staff meetings and mid to large in-person meetings still overwhelm me. And having closed captioning and video to read lips has been awesome. And when we have this dynamic of trying to bring everyone into the office more often, I've voiced the equity concern that, I actually can participate better in some of these meetings from home. And oftentimes people don't realize that until you mention it. And so I've gained more from large meetings on a remote environment than I've ever had before.
Okay, so there's been some benefit from COVID. Angela?
Yeah, I just wanted to share, as Cole was talking, a couple of resources that I've used. So my hearing aids are not Bluetooth, they're old and cheap because they're expensive and insurance hasn't covered them. So, but that's a whole nother topic. So I actually use AirPods for the phone because I can put on the noise canceling feature and it helps with my auditory quality. But what I did have with my hearing aids, even the low tech ones, is I work with babies, and Sophie mentioned kids crying and babies crying while I'm right there with them. It's really intense and overwhelming. So my hearing aids cut off at a certain pitch of babies crying, and I actually got to do that in the booth with my audiologist. Like, can you tolerate this baby crying? Yes. Can you tolerate this pitch of crying? No, shut it off. So my hearing aids do shut off at a certain pitch, which is really helpful for my work. And then there's an app that I actually asked the hospital to pay for as a job accommodation that's called Live Transcribe. And it's a really awesome app. I can just like transcribe right now and it will start picking up the audio in the room. And so, as Cole mentioned, for big meetings, my clinical work won't let me do that from home. And so I have to be in person. And so using this app has been a great resource and tool for me because I almost always have my phone and I can use it in almost any situation and setting. So just wanted to share that resource.
Is it pretty accurate?
It is. Yeah. Yeah. I've been really impressed with how accurate it is. More accurate than like, I think Zoom, captions tend to be the most variable, I think I've noticed in most of the virtual platforms, and it's more accurate than the Zoom captions for sure. So yeah, it's been a great tool.
Sophie, did you raise your hand?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, before I was an audiologist, I worked in finance, and in that industry, it's open concept offices and everyone's on the phone and it's right next to the trading floor. So there's just a lot of background noise. So I think this idea of this advocacy was really important because the company needs to provide accommodations. And so one of the things I learned, it was my first job out of college. So I was really nervous to ask, but I finally got worked up the nerve to say, because I had a BlackBerry and my BlackBerry didn't connect to my hearing aids. So I was like, I need an iPhone. And they were like, oh, we'll get you an iPhone. And so then I was able to take all these calls and I felt way more confident in my work and what I was producing to my boss with all the numbers, because I was actually, okay, no, this is accurate. I know what I'm getting and I know what I'm, reporting. It was a big hurdle for me, but it was something that I sort of look back on with just great pride because it was just a really important moment. I was out there by myself. My parents weren't out there to sort of help me do it. They encouraged me, but it was me taking that first step.
Yeah, great. And we're going to see, I think we have time for one more question. We only have about 5 more minutes. So let's see if there's a question from the audience. Okay. What do you wish others, such as family, colleagues, friends, knew about the challenges you face with listening? And also, I think I would add in listening fatigue. What do you wish that other people understood about the challenges of listening and the impact of listening fatigue on you? Anyone want to tackle that one? Okay, Sophie?
I think I sort of alluded it to earlier, but that we don't always know that it's happening to us, that it sometimes creeps up on us. And I think even as a kid, I had no idea I was experiencing listening fatigue. You know, I we would go to school, we would play sports, come back. You had no idea that this is what happened. Kind of like what Angela was saying, I was also a really good sleeper. Um, you know, and I think a lot of it is because you spent the entire day um, trying so hard. And so I think what families and friends should know is that we're constantly trying from the moment we wake up and put our devices in our ears. We're constantly trying and we're constantly working, and it's not easy. And it just a little bit of help goes a really long way.
And a little understanding and being kind. Cole?
Yeah, similarly, in an environment where it looks like I can do well and it looks like I'm following the conversation, we're pretty good at thinking we hear something and then we might say something completely out of context from what they're talking about. And, sometimes you just have to be silly about it, but I think it happens a lot. And so when we look like we got this and following, often we don't. And I think to your point about being kind, especially people that know me well, I wish they would maybe check in more with me in conversation to say, "Hey, are you hearing okay? Is this a good environment?" A little more empathy because it is very exhausting.
Bridget?
I just wanted to say that I feel like sometimes people misunderstand how well I'm going to understand other people in a certain situation where, like we talk about the sound booth, it's an acoustically very good environment, and so even when people wear masks, I can usually get along okay. But if I move outside of that sound booth, even if I'm still talking to the same person out in the hallway, my ability to understand what they're saying goes down quite a lot. And so I wish people would not generalize my listening ability across all environments, that they would understand more that it only takes one variable to be changed, like where I am or how much background noise is, and my ability to understand changes dramatically. And I feel like people forget that sometimes, that they just assume, well, she can understand in this environment, and so it should apply to other environments as well. And that's something that I was struggling with other people. And I also feel like I wish people would sometimes understand just how exhausted we are. That, Sophie, you talked about that you don't realize sometimes that you checked out in the middle of the day, and then you realize, oh, I totally checked out. That happened to me all the time, every day. And I feel like if I check out for a minute or two during a conversation or during something I'm supposed to be listening to, I'm kind of falling behind, and not that I can't follow the conversation as well anymore. And so to other people, it might appear that I just don't understand what's going on, but I just sometimes need to mentally take a little break and then rejoin the conversation. So I sometimes need people to be patient and kind of help catch me up a little bit.
And Angela, you're going to end us up.
Yeah, I just would add that I describe to people around me that for people without hearing loss, listening is a passive activity. It's sort of like breathing. You don't really think about it. The sound comes in and your brain processes it. But for us, listening is a very active activity that takes attention and focus. And so if you add that on top of what we're already trying to do, right? I'm trying to be a physical therapist, I'm trying to be a wife, a friend, on top of trying to be a listener. That just is a way that I've kind of tried to use to explain to my friends and family a little bit more about what it's like to be a listener with hearing loss. I also have established rules in my household with people that I care about. You don't yell at me from another room. If you're trying to talk to me, you come find me. Lights are on when we're talking. We don't talk at night when the lights go off. That means communication is over. And we just have captions are always on every screen and every TV, no matter who's there. And so I think just kind of having some established like guidelines, and now it's just, I mean, my husband's amazing and my close friends are amazing. And it's just a given, when we watch a movie with Angela, captions are on. And I've learned that even my friends without hearing loss enjoy captions. And so it's kind of become like a standard in our group. Even when I'm not there, they tell me that they use captions. So I think having some, norms and routines around how you communicate as a person with hearing loss can be really helpful.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I always have captions on my TV. You just get used to it, and it's there, and it makes it easier. Well, thank you so much. Anyone want to add anything else that they thought of or that was triggered by either the speaker today or by what you heard from someone else? I so appreciate your time, and this is very interesting, and I hope that the audience can take away some of your great advice and what you shared and your experiences. And I think it's such a critical thing for everyone to be aware of how I love that it's an active thing for you guys, and it takes more energy than for a hearing person where it's more passive and we don't think about the effort, and we can all be much more considerate and kind. Yes, Angela.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to say one last thing. I feel a little bit like emotional just being here right now because this is an experience that I never had as a kid. And I just think about all the people on this call who are parents of children with hearing loss, and they're here to learn more about how to support their kids. And there's professionals here who are dedicating their careers on how to support kids with hearing loss. And just hearing other peers around me that also, struggle with the same things I struggle with. It's just, it's really powerful. So I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who put on this symposium. Thanks for inviting us to speak. Thanks for everybody on the panel sharing, and to all the parents who are here to help support their kids. It's really amazing.
Well, I can't top that, so thank you very much.